This is Chapter 1, Arrival at the Tavern. Fiora narrowly avoided a giant hailstone as she sidestepped into the nearest tavern. She'd been on the road for a long time and her legs were aching from the last mile of walking through the storm. As the warmth of the many braziers wrapped around her, Fiora unplastered her sodden cape from around her head and moved the wedge of fringe from her eyes. The Moonlit Meadery was full of life, bustling with several excited travellers and locals alike. The barkeep was juggling several jugs of mead as thirsty strangers leaned over the bar and thrust gold coins towards them. The smell of roasting potatoes wafted through the air, and Fiora felt her stomach rumble. She hadn't realized she was hungry until now, and suddenly she was ravenous. There was another smell in the air too. Something warm, slightly spicy. The smell of cocoa? To the left of the doors, a group of burly orcs sat, loudly playing a game of cards. They grunted in Fiora's direction, warning her to behave in the meadery. Fiora pulled her wet cape around her a little tighter and decided where to move next. So, first poll of the night, everyone. You get to decide where Fiora is going to sit. Does she choose to sit by the roaring fireplace, at the bustling bar, or in a quiet corner? Now, keep in mind that whatever you choose will have an effect on the story. So it's completely up to you what you choose. You, wonderful chatters, have decided to get Fiora to sit by the roaring fireplace. Fiora quickly moved through the bustle, delighted to spot an open table next to the roaring fireplace. She nestled into one of the armchairs, having shrugged off her outer layers and delicately placing them as close to the fire as she could without the embers catching the fibers. The chair felt plush against her body, worn from travelling across the lands. Taking a moment of quiet to reflect her journey so far, Fiora sank into a deep state of relaxing. The gentle heat of the fire warmed her tired skin, and she fell easily into a restful sleep. Fiora awoke with a start. Something felt amiss as she blinked the sleep from her eyes. So, something has gone awry already. Fiora has just woken up from her nap. It's time to roll our first die. If you haven't already decided to join, you need to do !my dice space join in chat. I'm gonna call the first dice roll. The first dice roll of the night, friends. Ranicore, could you in chat do command roll? That's it, command roll. You're gonna decide. You rolled a d5? Ranicore! Get your rolls going, man! Fiora rose to her feet slowly, still exhausted from the surprise sleep. As she stood, her foot snaked around a table leg and she fell to the ground, hitting her head on the edge of a wooden table. Fiora brought her hand to her forehead and felt a little warmth as blood balled on the surface. She went to reach into the front pocket of her satchel, but it was missing. Someone must have taken it. Fiora stood again, looking around, but there was no sign of the thief. We've messed up, friends. We've messed up already. It's okay, though. I'm sure it'll be fine. Right? Fiora felt herself calming down as she reflected on the events that had just transpired. She knew the calmer she was, the easier she'd find it to think straight. Her stomach grumbled as the smell of roasting potatoes wafted through the air again. It was time to make a decision. Friends, we need to make our second choice of the evening. Who does Fiora talk to first? Does she talk to the mysterious cloaked figure hidden by the corner? Does she talk to the friendly bartender, Tom, at the bar? Or does she talk to a group of jovial dwarfs in the corner? We are going to go and chat to a group of jovial dwarfs, friends. Here we go. We're in the corner and we're waiting for the dwarfs. But what do the dwarfs look like? These are our dwarf friends. They are here. The warm amber glow of the braziers bathed the Moonlit Meadery in a comforting light as Fiora looked around. Her eyes fell on a group of jovial dwarfs gathered in a corner, their laughter and boisterous conversation rising above even the loudest of patrons in the bar. She decided to join them, feeling the merriment might lift her spirits. As Fiora approached, one of the dwarfs noticed her and raised his tankard in greeting, spilling drops of the beverage over the side. "Ah, lass, come join us! There's always room for one more at our table." Fiora smiled, feeling a bit of her tension ease. "Thank you. I could use some company tonight." The dwarfs made space for her, and she took a seat on the sturdy wooden chair. The dwarf who had greeted her, who introduced himself as Weston, offered her a tankard of ale. "Here, have a drink. It's the best brew this side of the mountains." Fiora accepted the tankard gratefully. Thank you, Weston. I'm Fiora. Pleasure to meet you, Fiora, Weston replied with a grin. These are my cousins, Bolvin and Wilden, he said, indicating the other two dwarfs. We're just back from a long journey and we thought we'd stop by the Moonlit Meadery for some good food and even better mead. The dwarfs laughed, slamming their tankards together. Fiora found herself joining in, but protecting her face from spillages. She took a sip of the ale, enjoying its rich, hearty flavour. I'm glad I joined you. It's been a rough day. Bolvin, a dwarf with a thick mane of hair and a mischievous smile, leaned in. A rough day, eh? Well, nothing a plate of Oyege and Adil's triple-cooked roasted potatoes can't fix. Have you tried them yet? Fiora shook her head. Not yet, but they smell incredible. Weston waved over at a passing barkeep. A plate of those famous potatoes for our new friend here and make it quick. As they waited for the food, the dwarves regaled Fiora with tales of their adventures. She found herself laughing along with their stories, the heaviness in her heart lifting with each shared joke and hearty laugh. It was exactly the kind of distraction she needed. Thank you! Welcome to the tavern! The barkeep soon returned with a plate piled high with golden crispy potatoes. Fiora's mouth watered at the sight. These look amazing! Thank you! Weston raised his tankard again. To good food and to good mead! To good food and to good mead, the others echoed, clinking their tankards together. As Fiora dug into the delicious potatoes, she felt a renewed sense of warmth and camaraderie. The Moonlit Meadery, with its friendly patrons and welcoming atmosphere, was truly a place of solace and strength. Surrounded by the dwarfs, Fiora knew she had made the right decision to sit down to their company. She felt safe and looked after, if only for a moment. As Fiora continued enjoying the company of the mead and the dwarfs, a member of the barkeep found his way over to the table. Fiora was leaning back in her chair, the laughter of dwarfs filling her ears, and the warmth of their company slowly easing the tension in her shoulders. Weston, Bolvin, and Wilden were regaling her with tales of their latest journey through the mountains, each story growing more exaggerated and absurd as the nights wore on. Fiora was laughing along with them, her worries momentarily forgotten in the mirth of the moment. But as Bolvin finished another tale of a wild encounter with a mountain troll, Fiora felt a tap on her shoulder. At that moment, one of the barkeep's assistants approached the table. She carried a small, wrapped package tied with thick black ribbon. The edges of the paper were worn, and the package had an odd weight to it, almost as if it held something more than just a simple gift. Are you Fiora? The assistant asked. As Fiora nodded her confirmation, the barkeep held out the package with a look of curiosity. Meant for your eyes only, apparently. Fiora hesitated for a moment, her fingers brushing the package before lifting it carefully. She studied the wrapping, noting the intricate design of the symbols carved into the paper. Symbols she didn't recognize. Her heart quickened, a mix of intrigue and wariness rising within her. The dwarfs quieted as Fiora stared at the package, her fingers instinctively reaching for it. It felt heavier than it looked, as though something of significance was hidden within. Her brows furrowed in confusion. That's a bit odd, Wilden muttered, his thick beard twitching as he leaned forward. A parcel? In the middle of the night? From who? Bolvin leaned back in his chair, eyeing the package with a mixture of curiosity and caution. A gift, maybe? A warning? Hard to tell with things wrapped up like that. He grinned, clearly more amused than concerned. But I say, open it. What's the worst that can happen? Fiora's fingers brushed the rough ribbon, but she hesitated. The idea of opening it now felt strangely wrong. The tavern was noisy, full of life, but her focus had narrowed entirely on this small, innocuous parcel that didn't belong. I don't know, Fiora murmured, still unsure. It feels strange. Who would send something like that to me? Weston, who had been unusually quiet up until that point, cleared his throat and eyed the package thoughtfully. The best way to find out is to open it, but maybe not here, lass. Whatever's in there could be more than just a trinket. Fiora glanced from Weston's knowing eyes to the curious stares of the other dwarfs. The decision weighed heavily on her. There was a tension in the air now, the jovial mood of moments ago dampened by the mystery of the parcel. Should she open it now, or wait and risk losing her chance to uncover its secrets? Her fingers lingered over the package, but still, no decision came. The moment felt too important to rush. So, what do we do, chat? Do we open the package or set it aside? There is a poll running at the top of the screen. Please, Thank you. There is a poll running at the top of the screen. Please let us know. Are we going to open it or are we going to set it aside for now? This is going to make a difference in the story, as all the choices do. There is about to be an ad running, so as soon as that ad has been run, we'll go on to opening the package. This is also the only, because you picked the dwarfs, it's the only storyline where you would have found out who the dwarfs' names are. So congratulations. Do you know why pirates wore eye patches? No, tell me more. Tell me more. Okay, the ad is officially over. It's time to open the parcel. Fiora took a deep breath, her fingers still hovering over the small, mysterious parcel. The dwarfs watched her with a mix of curiosity and anticipation. The weight of the moment pressed down on her, but a spark of determination flared within her. She's come this far, hasn't she? No more hesitation. With a swift motion, she untied the ribbon and peeled back the rough paper. The tavern's chatter seemed to fade as she revealed its contents. Inside, wrapped in layers of linen, was a gleaming black stone. It was smooth and cool to the touch, its surface glinting with a strange iridescence, almost like it contained the shifting reflection of distant stars. The dwarfs leaned forward, their eyes widening. "What in the name of the forge is that?" Wilden muttered, his voice low with unease. Fiora turned the stone over in her hands, feeling a slight pulse of energy from within. It was faint, but unmistakable. The tavern's warm glow seemed to dim around her, the air thickening with an odd sense of foreboding. The laughter and chatter of nearby patrons continued, but it now felt distant, as if muffled by some unseen force. "That's no ordinary stone," Weston said, his voice taut with caution. "It feels unnatural." Baldwin reached out, but Fiora quickly pulled the stone closer to her chest. "Careful," she snapped. Her fingers tingled with a strange warmth and a flicker of a vision. Flashes of long-forgotten ruins and twisted foreign landscapes flickered at the edge of her mind. "You should be careful, lass," Baldwin warned. "That thing could bring more trouble than it's worth." Fiora didn't respond. She couldn't tear her eyes away from the stone. Something deep within it called to her, and she knew, deep down, that this was only the beginning. Suddenly protective over the stone, feeling an urge to keep it safe, Fiora tucked it down into the bottom of her deepest pocket, breathing a sigh of relief as the balance in the room returned to normal. The dwarfs eyed each other warily, and after a few moments, Weston continued his story of the mountain troll. So Alfie is going to be running polls between the actual choices. Like this one is a between the choice, and this is like a personal one. But the ones that are the choices, I'll make sure that you know that they're going on screen as well. One moment, the tavern was alive with a hum of conversation, the clink of mugs and the soft crackle of the hearth. And next, a loud crash echoed across the room as a heavy chair was knocked over. It started small, a shouted insult between two patrons at a nearby table, but within seconds, it escalated into full-fledged brawl. Chairs scraped across the floor, and someone, Fiora couldn't tell who, shouted something about a debt. A punch flew, catching a large man square in the jaw. The punch thrower, a small, wiry man, was already reaching for a tankard to swing at his target, screaming at his opponent. The dwarves around her stood up quickly, their hands already gripping mugs and weapons. Bolvin let out a laugh that was more of a growl, ready for action, while Wilden cursed and stood tall, his fists clenched. Wilden and Bolvin moved forwards as if ready to join the fight, whether to break it up or to entertain themselves. Weston raised his hand, looking at his cousins. He muttered something, looking towards the tankards, about joining in being a good waste of ale. His cousins sat down, grumbling, but eager to return to their drinks. So, chat! Choice 4. How does Fiora react to the brawl? Do we try and break up the fight? Do we stay out of it and observe? Or do we use a distraction to sneak out and explore? Can we get a background of that character so we can decide if she can fight or not? One of them is a very small, wiry man. One of them is a really big, burly man. That's pretty much all you need to know. They're not incredibly important, but your decision is important. So just to let you all know, I have written 3 different pathways. So if you chose each of the 3 options, and then I've written pathways depending on who you were sat with. So that's why it's a lot of flipping pages. Having finished their mead and with no more excuses to not get involved in the fight, Bolvin let out a hearty laugh, slamming his tankard down and jumping to his feet. "Aye, now this is more like it," he roared, clearly excited by the chaos. Wilden, more restrained but equally eager, stood with a grunt, cracking his knuckles. "Let's see if we can end this before it gets out of hand," he muttered, his voice low and gruff. Fiora, still sitting at the table, couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. The brawl was escalating quickly, and while the dwarf seemed to thrive in this kind of environment, Fiora knew better than to get swept up in the frenzy. She stood and backed away, observing as the dwarfs leapt into the fray with wild enthusiasm. Wilden was already pulling one of the large brawlers off a nearby patron, while Borvin was swinging his tankard like a club, knocking one of the fighters off balance with a powerful strike. Fiora was caught between the thrill of the dwarf's battle spirit and the realization that this wasn't her fight to fight. Instead of diving in, she took a step back, staying clear of the action but ready to jump in if someone needed help. Her instincts told her to observe, just for a moment longer, until the fight began to die down. Eventually, the brawl began to slow as exhaustion and confusion set in. The tavern quieted, save for the panting of the combatants. Fiora let out a breath, silently relieved she hadn't gotten caught up in the mess. Her decision to observe had kept her out of danger, at least for now. Fiora grinned in the aftermath of the fight. It was done, and now she had the rest of an evening to relax in peace. But before she did, though, she felt a pulling in her gut. There was something in this tavern that she was meant to find. But what? Now, friends, because you unwrapped the stone earlier, this is now important. As she nestled herself into her seat, the stone she tucked down in her pocket started vibrating strongly. She pulled it out and it quieted, happy to be in Fiora's hands. The stone buzzed again, and Fiora knew it was telling her to move. She walked to the western wall, casting her eye over it again. The black stone glowed, the light reflecting back onto the wall and revealing edges that matched a typical door height. Fiora instinctively reached forward, going to grab where the handle should be, and found herself walking into a dark room. She stepped inside into a narrow hallway. The air was cool and stale, carrying the scent of old parchment and dust. The hallway stretched onward, illuminated only by a few dimly flickering braziers. I love that word, I'm sorry. Fiora's curiosity deepened as she crept forward, her footsteps muffled by the thick, threadbare carpet beneath her boots. At the end of the hallway, another door stood ajar. No need to be punched open. Inside, she found herself in a dimly lit room, one far different from the noisy tavern. The stone walls were lined with shelves, crammed full of dusty tomes, scrolls, and oddities. But what truly caught her eye were two books placed neatly on a wooden table in the center of the room. She approached cautiously, her eyes narrowing as she saw that the books were flipping through the pages on their own. The air around them seemed to hum with quiet energy, as if the books themselves were alive. She reached out a hand, but then hesitated, aware that any movement might disrupt whatever strange magic was going on. The pages turned, each flickering sound echoing in the otherwise silent room. The books seemed to respond to her presence, almost as if they were waiting for her to engage. Intrigued, Fiora stepped forward, her heartbeat quickening. The strange magnetic pull of the books was irresistible, but something told her to be careful. The mystery of the room and its contents were too enticing to ignore. But what had she uncovered? She couldn't say for certain, but it was clear that this tavern held secrets far deeper than she'd ever imagined. As Fiora moved closer to the books, a voice suddenly rang out from the shadows behind her, making her jump in surprise. "I wouldn't touch them if I were you." Fiora spun around, her hand instinctively moving towards her dagger, but she froze when she saw the newcomer. A figure stood in the doorway, leaning casually against the frame, their arms crossed and a knowing smile playing at the corner of their lips. The air around them shimmered slightly, their ethereal presence making the dim light of the room seem even more distant and surreal. Their eyes were vibrant, and they wore a loose, flowing garment that looked like it belonged to a much warmer place than this stone, musty library. "I'm sorry, were you just expecting me to leave those books alone?" Fiora asked, a hint of dry humor in her voice. She was on edge, but she was curious about this stranger. The figure laughed lightly. "That depends. If you're hoping to survive the next few minutes, then yes, I'd suggest you keep your hands to yourself." Their voice was light and playful, yet there was an undercurrent of seriousness that made Fiora pause. The stranger pushed off from the doorway and stepped further into the room, the air swirling around them like a light breeze. Fiora could feel a cool gust stir the papers on the table as the figure approached, the sound of wind following in their wake. "I'm Gale Saphiro," they said with a grin, giving Fiora a friendly nod. I suppose you could say I have a bit of experience with strange magical artifacts, especially the ones that don't like to be touched. They winked at Fiora, their grin mischievous and bright. But if you're looking for trouble, I'm sure I can find some entertainment for you. Fiora studied Gale for a moment, intrigued. There was something about them, an air of playfulness and curiosity that was almost palpable. So, these books, Fiora coughed, trying not to get caught up in Gale. She gestured towards the strange, self-turning pages. Why should I avoid them? Gale's smile faded into something more thoughtful, their eyes turning briefly to the books before returning to Fiora. Let's just say they're not the kind of things you want to meddle with if you're not prepared for what's inside. They stepped close to the table, their bare feet making no sound against the stone floor. And you know that how, exactly? I've made the mistake of poking at a few enchanted books in my day. Trust me, some of them bite. So unless you want to learn things you weren't meant to know, or worse, wake something up, you might want to reconsider. There was an intensity in Gale's eyes now, but the playful energy remains. Fiora, standing just a little taller, felt curiosity spark within her. And what would you suggest instead? Looking through this fabulous collection, maybe? They gestured to the other books filling the room. All right, but if anything goes wrong, you're taking the blame. Fair enough, but I don't think we need to worry about that. Let's see what these old books are hiding, shall we? As Fiora and Gale surveyed the room, their eyes scanning through the many books scattered around the shelves, one tome in particular seemed to draw her attention. It was a thick, leather-bound book, its cover adorned with intricate, swirling patterns that shimmered faintly as if caught in a perpetual breeze. The book was placed slightly apart from the others, as though it had been waiting for someone to notice it. Fiora took a step forward, her hand instinctively reaching for it. Gale watched her curiously, their playful energy momentarily subdued, sensing the shift in the air. That one, huh? Gale said, voice low and thoughtful. Be careful with it. That's the kind of book that doesn't get noticed unless it wants to be. Friends, it is time for another dice roll! It's another dice roll, everyone! And of the 17 people who are currently in the list, we're going to see who has the chance to do our dice check for us. Joey, you're so cute! You're going to make me cry again! Trini! 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 I need you to do !roll in chat, and you are going to be the deciding vote. A D9! A D9! Fiora's fingers brushed the cover of the book, its subtle hum calling to her. She straightened up, taking a deep breath before she spoke firmly. Show me your secrets. For a moment, nothing happened. The book remained still, its leather cover smooth under her hand. But then the pages flicked open, as if reacting to her words. The air around her grew colder. The soft rustling of turning pages filled the air. Fiora felt a rush of excitement, but also an underlying ease. She leaned closer, watching intently as the words seemed to rearrange themselves, shifting from one page to another, in a maddening, unreadable dance. The book's magic was undeniable, but it wasn't what she expected. It wasn't giving her answers, just more questions. Suddenly, the pages stopped moving. The book snapped shut with a loud thud as though rejecting her attempts to control her. Fiora pulled her hand away, startled. A low, mocking laugh echoed through the room, but when she looked around, Gale was watching with a mixture of amusement and concern. You got it to open, Gale said, a hint of admiration in their voice, but not in the way it wanted. Fiora stood there uneasy, the book now silent, but still holding the promise of something unknown. The secrets it contained were just out of reach. Fiora held the book tightly in her hands and tucked it carefully under her arms. This was a book she didn't want to let go of, and somewhere within her, she knew the book didn't want to let go of her. Gale's head snapped up, their stormy eyes widening. Something's happening in the tavern. They hurried back through the narrow passage, their footsteps echoing off the stone walls. As they emerged into the main room of the Moonlit Meadery, chaos greeted them. Patrons were shouting and scrambling to get out of the way, overturning chairs and tables in their haste. At the center of the commotion was a massive, fur and feather-covered beast, an owlbear. The creature's powerful talons were sunk into the wooden floor, and its beak snapped angrily at anyone who dared come close. Its eyes were wide with a wild, frenzied light, and its feathers bristled with aggression. Underneath the owlbear, struggling to fend off the creature's attacks, was the mysterious stranger, the elf, that Fiora had noticed in the corner earlier. His cloak was torn and blood dripped from a gash on his forehead. He fought valiantly, using a small dagger to try and ward off the beast, but he was clearly outmatched. Without hesitation, Fiora drew her sword and charged forward. "Gale, help me distract it!" Gale nodded, their hands already moving in a series of intricate gestures. A gust of wind whipped through the tavern, stirring up loose papers and debris. The owlbear roared in confusion as the wind buffeted it from all sides, momentarily disoriented. "Hey, over here!" Fiora shouted, swinging her sword to catch the owlbear's attention. The creature turned its fierce gaze toward her, its beak snapped menacingly. The elf took advantage of the situation, rolling out from under the owlbear and scrambling to his feet. He staggered slightly, but managed to regain his balance, his eyes narrowing with determination. Gale continued to manipulate the air, keeping the owlbear off balance. "We need to drive it out of here before it hurts anyone else." Fiora nodded, her grip tightening on her sword. On it. She lunged at the owlbear, aiming for its vulnerable spots, while Gale's winds kept the creature from focusing its attacks. Together, they fought with precision and coordination, slowly but surely driving the owlbear toward the door. The patrons of the Moonlit Meadery watched in awe and fear, the chaos gradually giving way to hope as the beast was pushed back. Just before they reached the door, the owlbear's eyes became pleading and soulful. Fiora gasped. "Gale, wait! There's something around its neck!" And it's time to find out what it was! We are going to be rolling for animal handling, and the person who is going to be rolling for us is Yona! Woo! Yona, can you do command roll in chat? So ! Roll. And you shall get the chance to roll. D14! Woohoo! As you know, we have the owlbear in the tavern who is quite angry at the moment. Fiora stepped closer, extending her hand towards the note around the owlbear's neck. "We're here to help you," she said, trying to project a calm authority. The owlbear's eyes flickered with recognition and it paused, its beak snapping less aggressively. Fiora reached for the note and carefully untied it, her movements slow and deliberate. The creature watched her, still tense but no longer attacking. She unfurled the note and read aloud. "This creature is under a spell. Help him find his way back to the enchanted forest, and you will be rewarded." Gale's eyes widened. An enchanted owlbear! No wonder it's so agitated. The elf, catching his breath, approached cautiously. "Thank you," he said, his voice strained. "I didn't know what was going on. Can you help it?" Fiora nodded. "Why was it after you?" "Must have just been, caught in the crossfire," the elf said. Do we trust the elf, chat? Do you think we trust him? Do you think the elf was only pinned down because he was caught in the crossfire? I think we should roll for insight. What do you think? Dylan! You get the chance to roll the die. Please roll well. The whole tavern could be counting on you. P break? Can we count him? A D19? Congratulations, we have rolled a 19. Is the elf someone we can trust? Are we going to do well in this insight check? Fiora didn't buy it. She had seen enough to know when someone was hiding something, and this was one of those moments. She stepped forward, her gaze steady and unflinching. You're lying, she said, her voice calm but sharp. There's more to this. The elf's face paled, his hand instinctively going to his dagger's hilt, but he didn't draw it. Instead, he exhaled sharply and met Fiora's eyes, an unspoken admission in the tension between them. All right, he said, his voice low. I'm not here by choice. I was sent to find you. They don't want you here. I think the owlbear sensed that and tried to stop me. Fiora's breath caught in her throat. Who sent you? She demanded, her grip tightening on her sword. The elf took another step back, as if he was weighing how much to say. I can't tell you everything yet, not yet, but trust me when I say it's for your own good. Fiora's eyes darkened with suspicion, his words sinking in. You've been following me? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I had no choice, the elf said quickly. Fiora felt a chill race down her spine. The game had changed and she was no longer sure who could be trusted. She cast a sidelong glance at Gale. but sensed a wave of calm that told her they were on her side. After the chaos of the owlbear attack, Fiella, a halfling, stepped forward with calm authority. Her movements were slow and deliberate. She had a way with creatures which had led her into a career as an animal handler. Her eyes locked with the creature's, reading its every twitch. "Easy now," she murmured in a low, soothing tone, her hands extended in a gesture of peace. Tom, the bartender, we haven't met Tom yet, but this is Tom. Tom, the barkeep, stepped cautiously to her side, his broad frame a stark contrast to Fiella's small form. "I'll help," he said, his voice steady but kind. He reached for a nearby chair, pulling it out of the way so Fiella could guide the creature to the back of the tavern, where she'd been sitting, nursing a small dog back to health. The owlbear growled low, but something about Tom's unflinching, calm demeanour seemed to register with the creature. As they neared the corner, it hesitated, its feathers bristling. Fiella kept speaking softly, offering a hand to the owlbear, her soothing words growing more insistent as she backed into the corner with the creature. To her surprise, the owlbear's wild eyes softened. It nuzzled Tom's hand, a quiet rumble of contentment vibrating in his chest. Fiella smiled, nodding her approval. "There you go. See? He just needed someone to trust." We are approaching our story ending, but don't worry, we've still got a while to go. We've got all of this left to go. The heavy door to the Moonlit Meadery swung open with a creak, drawing the attention of several patrons. In strode a man with a confident swagger. His freckled face flushed from the cold. His eyes, bright with mischief, scanned the room and then immediately settled on Fiora, who was sat near the bar. Who could it possibly be? Who could it be, friends? Well, this is Rake. "Ah, now there's a look of someone who's been meaning to have a chat with me for ages," Rake Fielder said with a grin, his voice warm, though slightly slurred from the last sip of something strong he'd had before entering. "Aren't you lucky I've finally come to relieve you of that responsibility, eh?" Fiora's eyes looked up from her mug, the corners of her lips twitching into a smile. She hadn't been expecting to run into anyone she knew, especially not someone like Rake. He made his way towards the bar, unbothered by the chaos that had just settled around them. "Tom, another round of your finest for me," Rake said, slapping the counter with a dramatic flair. "Make it a good one. A drink's got to have character, just like it's drinky, you know? No watered-down nonsense today. Everybody drink." He turned his gaze towards Fiora, leaning in slightly. "And you, lass, you look like you've been through a storm of your own. Drink up. It's a day for celebrating, if I do say so myself." Rake's jovial tone might have suggested he was lost in his own world, but something in his eyes hinted at a hidden agenda. He leaned back, looking out the window towards the raging storm before turning his attention back to the bar. His hands tapped rhythmically against the counter. "Funny how a storm brings people together, isn't it? Or maybe it's the mead," Rake continued, his grin widening as he caught sight of Gale beside Fiora. "Aye, the storm's not the only thing brewing in here today." As he fiddled with the sleeve of his coat, his smile remained, but there was an odd sense of anticipation that followed him, just beneath the surface. Just then, the door to the Moonlit Meadery swung open once again, this time with a soft creak that barely registered among the murmurs of the patrons. But the figure that stepped inside immediately commanded attention. Leoness was hard to miss. His broad shoulders filled the doorway as he ducked to avoid hitting the top of the frame. He was tall, easily towering over most of the crowd, with shaggy brown hair that fell into his eyes and a pale complexion that contrasted sharply with the warmth of the tavern. Tom looked up from polishing a mug, a welcoming smile spreading across his face. "Leoness," he called out. "Didn't expect to see you in today. Good to see you, as always." Under his breath, Rake muttered, "I did." Leoness returned the smile with a quick nod and moved towards the bar, his eyes scanning the room. It didn't take him long to spot Fiora, sitting next to Gale and Rake at the bar, their voices rising in easy conversation. "Fiora! Rake!" Leoness greeted them with a warm but tired smile, his deep voice rumbling like distant thunder. "Seems I've missed a bit of the action here, huh?" His gaze shifted to the broken chairs and talon marks in the floor, his brow furrowing slightly. The meadery had settled back into its usual hum, but the air still buzzed with the remnants of chaos. "Ah, just a little dust up with an owlbear," Gale chirped playfully. "But no worries, we've got it under control." "Don't forget the brawl," Fiora added. Rake raised his mug in greeting, his grin wide. Oh, Leona's just the person we needed. We were getting too civilized around here. Leona's chuckled softly, though his eyes flickered to Rake with a wary look. He took a seat next to Fiora, careful not to knock anything over in his usual way, and greeted Tom. Rake leaned over to Fiora with a mischievous glint in his eyes. I wonder if Leonis knows why everyone's gathering here today. He nudged Fiora gently, the smile never leaving his face. Oh, I think everyone in here is in for a surprise today, my friends. But not everyone's in on the secret yet. Fiora shot him a questioning look, her brow raised in curiosity. As the conversation continued, Leonis, as always, stayed quiet, content to let the others talk. But the look in his eyes suggested he knew more than he was letting on. Seated in the centre of the tavern, Reginald Bagwell had the air of a man who believed that the tavern should part at his feet. His broad shoulders squared as he walked. His impeccably tailored coat clung to his form with the precision of someone who believed they could command attention. He was used to being noticed, and when people didn't notice him, it irked him to no end. His eyes quickly scanned the room, settling on Fiora's table. The lively conversation, the laughter, and the general joviality irritated him immediately. Reginald was a man who preferred quiet, civilized settings, where the clink of silverware and soft murmurs of cultured voices were the only sounds he needed to hear. This was not the setting he had envisioned when he walked into the meadery early that evening, before the brawl and before the owlbear attack. Really, he muttered, purposefully loud enough for the table to hear. Must we make such a racket? His voice was thin and sharp, cutting through the warmth of the tavern. This is a respectable establishment, not some ruckus tavern for peasants. His eyes travelled over Fiora's table, a disdainful sneer curling at the edges of his lips. Can't you see some of us are trying to enjoy a drink? He continued, his tone dripping with condescension. I understand you might not know how to behave in such an environment, but surely... Tom, who had been polishing a mug at the bar, could feel his patience start to fray. His jaw clenched, but he forced a smile. Reginald, he said, his voice too sweet to be genuine. Nothing's different for the usual crowd here. Reginald huffed in response, his gaze settling on Tom for a brief moment, his expression one of barely concealed disdain. I expect better service, he said, turning back to the group. Perhaps if we could keep the noise level at a decent level, I might consider a meal here. I've yet to find one in this establishment worthy of my attention. He waved a dismissive hand in the air, turning away, but the tension he left in his wake lingered. Reginald continued to seethe, occasionally turning back to glare at Fiora and the others from across the tavern. Gale's eyes twinkled with mischief. Their stormy gaze darted over to Reginald, a sly grin tugging at the corner of their lips. Without missing a beat, Gale subtly shifted in their seat, their hands moving in a series of quick gestures beneath the table. The air in the tavern shifted, a breeze that seemed to emanate from nowhere. Reginald, too absorbed in his own indignation, didn't notice the change. His glass of mead, which had been sitting untouched on the edge of the table, suddenly wobbled, then tipped over, spilling its contents in a slow, exaggerated arc. Reginald's eyes widened as mead splashed across the table, drenching the fine fabric of his coat. His hand shot out, trying to save the drink without hope, and it was too late. He let out an exasperated growl, standing up quickly, the chair scraping against the floor. Wretched place, he snapped, looking around for the source of misfortune. But the tavern seemed unfazed, and with everyone else continuing their conversations as though nothing had happened, Gale, barely containing their laughter, gave a quick glance at Fiora, their eyes twinkling in satisfaction. Reginald, however, remained oblivious, turning his ire towards Tom. Reginald's frustration bubbled over as he grabbed his overcoat and stormed towards the bar. This place is beneath me, he muttered, glaring at the patrons around him. But as he marched, his eyes flicked back to his overturned drink. And that's when it clicked. He saw Gale, sitting innocently at the table, their hands folded neatly in their lap. But there was something about the way they were looking at him, those mischievous, stormy eyes, too casual to be coincidental. The breeze in the air, the spill of mead, it all lined up perfectly. His face twisted with realization. You, he snapped, pointing a finger at Gale. You did this. Gale's grin widened, but they shrugged nonchalantly. What's that, Reginald? You've been drinking too much. Reginald was fuming now. He clenched his fist, stepping towards Gale, ready to unleash his frustration. Enough of your games, Reginald growled, his pompous arrogance turning to outright anger. Tom, noticing the tension, leaned over the bar. Careful now, he warned, his tone calm but firm. How does Fiora react to Reginald? Do we intervene and defuse the situation? Do we let Gale handle Reginald, or do we challenge Reginald to a duel of wits? Now, I will say, the duel of wits is worth thinking about. Gale can handle themselves too, but I think it's either way. But I think it might be, either way is good. Either way is good. But I will say a duel of wits might depend on dice rolls. Just saying. You have decided to challenge Reginald to a duel of wits. If you want the chance to roll the winning dice check, time to join. Loki, you get to roll the die. What is our first dice roll? A D8? Oh man. Here we go. Reginald's snide remarks hung in the air, his gaze still icy and sharp. Fiora's jaw tightens as she slowly stood up from her seat, her hand resting on the hilt of her sword. Enough! Her voice rang out, cutting through the murmurs of the tavern. You may be a noble, but you don't get to speak to my friends like that, Reginald. The words were calm, but the challenge was clear. Reginald's face flushed with fury, but before he could retort, Fiora spoke again, her tone shifting to something almost playful. I propose a duel of wits. I'm sure your sharp tongue can match mine, huh? The surrounding patrons went silent, eyes flicking between the two, sensing a contest arising that would be entertainment like no other. Rake from the side raised an eyebrow, clearly intrigued by the turn of events. Even Tom from behind the bar looked up with mild curiosity. Reginald sneered, but he didn't back down. A duel of wits? That's the best you've got? Fine, but be warned, I don't lose. Fiora's gaze hardened. We'll see, won't we? The patrons in the tavern waited with bated breath. It's clear that neither Reginald nor Fiora would back down, and the stakes had now escalated far beyond a mere verbal spat. Ready yourself, Fiora said with a smirk, preparing for the mental battle ahead. Let's see if you can keep up. She took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. She had planned this moment carefully, knowing this duel was more about wits than brute force. However, as she started speaking, her words felt awkward, her speech lacking the finesse that she'd imagined. Reginald, I challenge you, not just on your knowledge of manners, but also... Fiora's words faltered for a moment, the pause hanging in the air. She pressed on, though it wasn't with the polished confidence she'd hoped. You seem to confuse arrogance with intelligence, which, isn't the same. Reginald's eyebrows raised, clearly unimpressed. A few patrons in the tavern exchanged glances, some clearly skeptical. It wasn't the worst delivery, but it was definitely not as sharp as Fiora intended. Reginald's voice cuts through the silence. Oh, how profound. I am shaking with the weight of your argument, he said, with a smirk rolling his eyes. Fiora's cheeks flushed, realizing she hadn't made the impact she'd intended, but she recovered quickly, unwilling to let her pride be crushed. I'm not done, she retorted, steeling herself for the next round, trying to push through the awkwardness of her initial slip-up. Right, friends, if you haven't already, and you would like to, join the dice queue. I've kept it open from last time, so Loki is now excluded. Sorry, Loki. You've had your dice roll, so anyone else who hasn't, feel free to get in. I'm gonna roll. This is for our second attempt, our roll for performance. Anya, it's time to roll. It's up to you. What are we gonna do? Are you possibly gonna continue this fight? Are you gonna lead us to greatness? Oh, a D9! A D9! Okay. Fiora takes a deep breath, trying to shake off the awkwardness of her first attempt. She steadies herself, focusing on Reginald. She straightened up, narrowing her eyes, ready for the next move. You know, she begins, her voice stronger this time. It's impressive how you managed to make everyone feel inferior with nothing but a few pompous words. How does that feel, Reginald? Holding everything over everyone else and yet... Still so desperately insecure. The audience quiets, sensing a shift in her tone. Fiora feels the air of the tavern on her, but she doesn't falter. You surround yourself with wealth and power, but it doesn't hide the fact that you've never had to prove your worth. You've always been handed everything, but that doesn't make you special. It makes you a fraud. Reginald's smirk tightens, his posture stiffening as the words sink in. He opens his mouth to retort, but Fiora doesn't let him get a word out. You wouldn't last a minute without that name of yours, without your riches, without everyone fawning over you like you're some sort of deity. But if you really had substance, you'd be able to stand on your own, won't you? Her words land with more precision this time, and the crowd seems to react positively. Some chuckle at Reginald's discomfort. Even Gale, standing by, can't help but raise an eyebrow in approval. Reginald's bravado wavers for a second. And though he tries to recover, the edge has been taken off his arrogance. The tables have turned, and Fiora can feel a small but significant victory taking root. But it's not over yet. We have one more role to do. Luce, are you still here? Feel free to do your roll! Exclamation mark roll. Luce is deciding. A D4! A D4. Okay. It's not the worst. It's not the worst. Thank you, Luce. I appreciate you. Fiora, frustration mounting from the previous failed attempts, squares her shoulders and takes a deep breath. All right, Reginald, she says, her voice steady but tinged with impatience. Let's settle this properly. I can't stand to listen to you any longer. Reginald looks smug, sensing an opportunity to crush her with a cutting remark. Oh, really? I'd be more than happy to end this charade, he sneers, raising an eyebrow. Fiora's words flow as she makes her case, clever and cutting, but in her haste, she loses her precision that made her early attempts sharp. She stumbled over her words, her argument faltering mid-sentence. You think you're superior to everyone in here, but... She begins, but the next part comes out in a jumbled mess, causing a slight stammer. But you're really just a man hiding behind his wealth, hoping everyone doesn't notice his insecurity. The words hit their mark, but they lack the sting they should have had, and Reginald quickly retorts with a sarcastic laugh. Is that the best you've got? What a pathetic attempt at a defense. Fiora's mind races to salvage the conversation, but the damage has already been done. Reginald's confidence hasn't wavered, and though the crowd is somewhat entertained, Fiora's verbal jab hasn't quite had the effect that she intended. The room's tension remains, but it now feels like a stalemate. Reginald is still smirking, and Fiora is left grappling for the next move. So, Reginald, done. He's gone. He has won. If you can imagine the tavern, right? Everyone is sort of sinking back in their chairs, a little bit sad with how the verbal spat played out. And Fiora sinks down into her chair, thinking about all the events that had occurred over the night. The brawl, finding the hidden library, seeing the owlbear, her verbal sparring with Reginald, which maybe was the worst event of them all, and finally sitting around the table with all of her friends, new and old. Fiora frowned, turning to face Leonas and Rake. How did you know I was here? Coincidence, Rake said quickly, downing his drink. Leonas looked away, but as he tried to lift his tankard with force, it detached at the handle, allowing the mug to crash hard into the table and spill all over Rake's lap. Rake gifted Leonas a glare as he deliberately and slowly wiped the mead from his clothes. Fiora chuckled at the scene, the tension slowly dissolving into the warmth of companionship. She shook her head, still curious but too tired to pry further. The mead and the company were starting to finally have a calming effect on her. Just then, the tavern doors swung open with a creak that has become increasingly familiar. Standing in the doorway was an elegant figure dressed in shimmering emerald robes, the light catching the intricate designs woven into the fabric. Her hair was a cascade of dark waves, it was a pigtails and brown. Her eyes sparkled with a mix of curiosity and kindness. On her feet were a pair of dazzling ruby slippers that seemed to glow with a magical aura. Excuse me, she called out, their voice carrying a melodic quality that commanded attention without demanding it. I hope I'm not intruding. Tom, ever the gracious host, stepped forward. Not at all. Welcome to the Moonlit Meadery. What can we get for you? The newcomer smiled warmly. Thank you. I'm Princess Nura of Oz. She introduced herself with a small, graceful curtsy. I was travelling and heard tales of your famous imported Gillican mead. I simply couldn't resist stopping by to try some. Fiora, intrigued by the unexpected arrival, waved her over. Please, join us. It's not every day we get royalty from Oz visiting. Princess Nura's eyes lit up, and they floated over to the table, their movements almost ethereal. Thank you, she said, taking a seat. I've been travelling quite a bit lately, and it's nice to find a place that feels so welcoming. As Tom hurried to fetch a mug of the famed mead, Nura's gaze wandered around the room, taking in the eclectic mix of patrons. Her expression was one of genuine interest and delight, as if each and every person held a story that she was eager to hear. So, what brings a princess from Oz to our humble tavern? Gale asked, their curiosity piqued. Nura chuckled softly. A little bit of wanderlust, I suppose. My mother's always told me stories of other realms, and I've wanted to see them for myself. The ruby slippers make travelling quite convenient. Fiora nodded, her own sense of adventure resonating with Nura's words. Well, you've certainly come to an interesting place. We've had quite the night ourselves. She pulled the book and the stone out and placed them with a thud on the table. Nura's eyes sparkled with intrigue. Oh, do tell. I'd love to hear all about it. As the group began recounting the night's events, Nura listened with rapt attention. It was clear that, despite her royal status, she relished the simple joys of camaraderie and storytelling. Tom returned with a mug of mead, gently placing it in front of Nura. Here you go, princess, the finest Gillican mead we have. Nura took a sip, her eyes closing briefly in appreciation and anticipation. Just for you, Nura. This is wonderful, thank you. As the night wore on, the atmosphere in the tavern grew even more lively, filled with laughter and shared stories. Princess Nura's presence added a touch of magic to the evening, making it a night Fiora would remember for years to come. Tom again approached their table, carrying a tray with a round of fresh drinks and a knowing smile. Another round for the heroes of the night, he said, setting the drinks down. And Fiora, I think there's something that you should see. Before Fiora could ask, Tom gestured towards the back of the tavern. Confused but intrigued, she followed him, with Gale, Leonas, and Rake trailing behind. They moved through the narrow hallway, past the kitchen, where Oyej and Nadil were busy with the night's cleanup. Tom opened a door at the end of the hall, revealing a small, cozy room decorated with garlands of flowers and colourful streamers. A large cake sat on the table in the centre, adorned with candles that flickered warmly. Surprise! Shouted a chorus of voices. Fiora's eyes widened as she saw familiar faces, people she hadn't seen in years, along with the friends that she had made that night. The elf she saved from the owlbear stepped forward, a sheepish grin on his face. Happy birthday, Fiora, he said softly, holding out a beautifully wrapped gift. Fiora was speechless. She turned to Rake, who was grinning from ear to ear. Did you plan all of this? Rake nodded, his eyes twinkling with mischief. I knew you wouldn't make a big deal out of your birthday, so I had to find a way to get you here. The elf here, he gestured towards the blushing elf, helped me keep tabs on you. Fiora smiled. In her travels, she'd completely forgotten the date. It was her birthday, and her friends were here to celebrate with her. Leonas stepped forward and handed Fiora a small bouquet of wildflowers. We all wanted to make sure you had a night to remember, but we didn't do it alone. He stepped aside to reveal a tall, slender figure draped in flowing robes of deep blue. His long silver hair framed a face marked by sharp, intelligent eyes and a knowing smile. Thunderfar! Fiora exclaimed, rushing to embrace the wizard. Happy birthday, Fiora, Thunderfar said, his voice warm and soothing. It's been too long. Fiora stepped back, her eyes shining with happiness. I can't believe you're here, and you were part of organising all of this? Thunderfar nodded. With a bit of magical assistance, of course, and a lot of chocolate as bribery. He winked, making everyone laugh. As they filled plates high and moved back to the table, which now had several more tables added to either side, and a lot more of her friends and family were joining her, including her friend Freya, who she hadn't seen in a long time. Fundalfar noticed the book lying in front of her. That's a mention for Anya's OC. "Where did you get this?" he asked, his eyes narrowing. "It called to me earlier tonight. It was in one of the back rooms here. Do you know this book?" He nodded, his expression turning serious. "Indeed, I do. It's a very special tome, one that has been in your family for generations. It's filled with powerful spells and knowledge that only the worthy can decipher." Fiora's eyes widened. "I had no idea." Fundalfar smiled. "It seems like you were meant to find it tonight. And speaking of gifts," he nodded towards the stone on the table. Fiora's face lit up as she admired the stone. "You sent this? I wondered where it came from." Fundalfar nodded, breaking them out of the silence. "It's a gift, enchanted to help you navigate your way through the world. Happy birthday, Fiora." As the night wore on, Fiora felt a deep sense of contentment. Surrounded by old friends and new, she realized how truly blessed she was. The chaotic events of the evening had led to this moment of pure joy, a reminder of the magic that life held. Leonis, still trying to piece together his broken mug, looked up and grinned. "Well, this has turned into quite the night." Rake laughed, clapping him on the back. "And it's not over yet. Let's celebrate." With that, the room filled with laughter and the clinking of glasses. Fiora looked around at her friends, feeling a warmth that had nothing to do with the mead. She raised her glass, catching everyone's attention. "To friends, old and new," she said, her voice full of emotion. "Thank you for making this the best birthday ever." The room erupted in cheers, and as Fiora looked around at the smiling faces around her, she knew this was a night she'd never forget. Despite the chaos, the surprises, and the unexpected adventures, she was surrounded by people who cared deeply for her, and that, she thought, was the best birthday gift of all. The end. Thank you, everyone. But we did it. We did it. We did it. We did it. That's officially like episode 1 of the Moonlit Meadery. I really wanted to do something special for my birthday. I really wanted to bring all of you along as well, because it's just lovely to have you here, and thank you so much. And I have to say a massive thank you to my wonderful mods for keeping everyone going with all the commands and things like that, because I literally wouldn't have been able to do that and run the story, so thank you so much. And a massive thank you to Alfie, who single-handedly did all the polls, either the ones that needed to be done and between things. I also want to thank everyone who listened to me waffle about this for a long time. This is 21,000 words, so if anyone wants to run this again in the future, this exact one again, we can run it again, and there are multiple different pathways. There are things that you haven't touched, there are endings that we can change as well. I couldn't have done this without all of you, so thank you so much for being here. Thank you. It's a tavern singing happy birthday. I forgot to play it at the end. I was too overwhelmed. Thank you. This guy here and my character Fiora, which is right over that side, that was Joey, 24 Sleep in chat. This is obviously a little guy from Baldur's Gate, so Mike made him in Baldur's Gate, and everyone else was made in Hero Forge. So if you want to make your own character, especially if you want to be included in a future stream, I'm going to keep open the thread on the Discord, so please feel free to come and join that. Thank you everyone for being here. I appreciate you so much. Please go and give all of the love to Selendria. If you haven't already, please grab the Waffle Raid. If you're subscribed, grab the Bongo Bats. If you're not, grab the hearts. Let's go over and make sure that we just share some of that amazing love. I'm so grateful for all of you being here and being a part of our community. Thank you so much.